Absorb a little of this, my mother said, expecting me to protect the golden child who forged my name. He used my law license for a $300,000 mortgage and a $1 4M investor fraud targeting 23 people. I didn't argue. I handed the FBI the record and let federal court explain what I would never absorb. My name is Peter Callahan. I was 38 years old when all of this surfaced, and I had spent 9 years building a career at Hartwell and Crane. I was licensed in 2 states. Mine was the kind of profession that depends on precision, reputation, and a paper trail that can survive scrutiny. Marcus was 4 years younger than me. In most families, that would have meant very little. In ours, it meant he got 4 extra years of excuses. He had run a food truck that lasted 8 months before the equipment lease defaulted. After that came a dropshipping business that made it through 1 tax season and no more. Then, a consulting firm that billed exactly 2 clients before folding inside a year. 3 failed businesses in 7 years, and my parents managed to describe every one of them the same way. A setback, a lesson, proof that Marcus was still on his way to something bigger. Potential was the family language for whatever Marcus had not yet earned. I had already built the thing I was supposed to be building, which in this family mostly meant I stopped being the person anyone worried about. That part I could live with. What I could not live with was what came next. Somewhere around Marcus's second failed venture, my family figured out that my name had a use his never would. Not just Peter Callahan, but Peter Callahan, Esquire, my firm, my licenses, my professional credibility. They never asked me to do anything openly illegal. They were more careful than that. What they asked for sounded temporary, harmless, almost flattering if you did not listen too closely. Co-sign this. Let us use your name on a proposal. Help Marcus look legitimate until he gets traction. I said no every time. So eventually they stopped asking and started borrowing pieces of me without permission. The first time I caught Marcus doing it, he had told a supplier he was working with my firm on an active contract. I was not involved in any way. I found out 3 months later through a mutual contact. I confronted him directly. He apologized immediately. My mother said he admired me and got carried away. My father said it was not a big deal. The second time was worse. Marcus used my bar license number on a formal business proposal and listed me as legal consultant on a project I had never approved, seen, or been paid for. That time I did not call him. I had my attorney draft a cease and desist letter addressed to my own brother. It stated, in plain legal language, that any further unauthorized use of my credentials would trigger a formal bar complaint and possible civil liability. Marcus signed the acknowledgement. He apologized again. My parents said I was overreacting. I did not file the complaint. At the time, I believed the cease and desist had done what it was supposed to do. Later, I learned Marcus had kept a copy. The alert hit my phone at 6:47 on a Wednesday morning in March. A new mortgage account had been opened in my name. Lender, Crestview Capital. Amount, $300,000. Opened 2 weeks earlier. Co-borrower, entity, Linux Holdings LLC. The originating branch was in the same zip code as Marcus's last known address. I called Crestview Capital before 7. The representative asked a series of verification questions and then began reading back the application details. My full name, my social security number, my bar license numbers in both states. The signature date, February 28th. Every identifying detail was correct. Every document attached to the file was attached to me. I had never seen the application. I had never signed any part of it. I had heard the name Linux Holdings exactly once before that call. Marcus had mentioned it at Christmas dinner 8 weeks earlier in the same tone he used for every new scheme: relaxed, vague, already speaking as if the hard part had somehow solved itself. I had not asked follow-up questions. I assumed it would disappear the way most of his ideas did. It had not disappeared. After I got off the phone with Crestview, I searched the company name. Linux Holdings LLC had a website. It was clean, professional, expensive-looking in the way fraudulent businesses often try to be when they want strangers to trust them quickly. The site listed Peter Callahan, Esquire, as co-founder and general counsel. The photo was pulled directly from my public biography page on Hartwell and Crane's website. Under my name were both of my bar license numbers. The firm described itself as a boutique investment and asset management operation with full legal oversight. There were testimonials. There were 4 investment tiers: $25,000, $75,000, $150,000, and $250,000. The domain registration dated back 11 months. I had known nothing about any of it. I took screenshots of every page. Then I called Hartwell and Crane's managing partner. It was still not 8 o'clock. He answered on the second ring. I told him about the mortgage, the website, the use of my name, the licenses, all of it. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said 4 words. Call your personal attorney. I called my personal attorney first. Then, that evening, I called Marcus. He answered on the third ring sounding relaxed, which was the first useful thing he gave me. Not because it made him sound innocent, because it meant he did not yet understand the situation had changed. I said 2 words. Lennox Holdings. There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. Marcus did not deny anything. He moved straight to minimization. Look, it was temporary, he said. We needed the name to get off the ground. Your credentials gave it legitimacy. That's all it was. I noticed the word we and let it pass. Then he kept talking. Nobody got hurt. It was just money moving. It was supposed to pay out. The mortgage was a bridge situation. Temporary collateral. The plan had always been to unwind it before it touched my credit. I was making it into something it wasn't. He was going to fix it. I needed to let him fix it without turning a paperwork problem into something bigger than it had to be. He sounded annoyed by my questions, which told me more than panic would have. Just let me handle it, he said. Don't do anything stupid. I asked him how many investors Lennox Holdings had taken money from. He said he did not have an exact number. I asked him whether my name and credentials had been used without my knowledge. He stopped dodging long enough to answer that one indirectly, which was answer enough. I asked him whether our parents knew. There was another pause there. Shorter. Sharper. Then he said, Peter, don't do this right now. That was answer enough too. The call lasted 22 minutes. I had my call logging application running the entire time, the same one I use for client communications. When it ended, I had a clean recording of Marcus using we more than once before correcting himself, acknowledging that my credentials had given the firm legitimacy, and describing a forged mortgage in my name as a temporary solution to a paperwork issue. I did not call him back. 2 days later, my mother called. Her opening was smooth enough that, in another family, it might have sounded sincere. She asked how I was. She said Marcus told her I was upset. She said she wanted to help sort things out before anything got out of hand. Then she got to the point. The family needs you to stay calm about this, she said. If you go to the authorities, Marcus loses everything. You have always had more than he has. Surely you can absorb a little of this. A few minutes later, my father got on the line. He said I needed to remember what family meant. He said Marcus had made mistakes, but that was what family was for, helping each other through mistakes. Neither of them used the word fraud. Neither of them mentioned identity theft. Neither of them asked what this had already cost me professionally, financially, or legally. They spoke as if the real emergency was not what had been done in my name. It was the possibility that I might refuse to keep carrying it. The entire conversation revolved around Marcus. What it would cost him if I acted. What it might do to him if I stopped protecting the family version of events. I listened. I did not tell them I had already retained personal counsel 3 days earlier. I did not mention the recording. I let them think I was still somewhere inside the range of persuasion. I was not. But by then I understood something that mattered. Marcus had built the fraud. My parents were trying to manage the witness. My personal attorney retained a forensic accountant the following week. The assignment was simple on paper: pull every public filing, corporate registration, bank-linked record, and lending document connected to Lennox Holdings and tell me what, exactly, existed beneath the name. She spent 2 weeks doing that. When the report came back, the number that stayed with me first was not the mortgage. It was 23. 23 individual investors had transferred money into Lennox Holdings accounts. Most were retirees or close to retirement. The age range ran from 51 to 78. Total funds solicited, approximately $1.4 million. Total funds returned, 0. The mortgage was still there, of course. $300,000 drawn against a commercial property in Marcus's name that had been appraised at $180,000. On its own, the property did not support the loan. It needed a stronger cosigner on paper. That was where my forged signature came in. It was the difference between a file that stalled and a file that cleared underwriting. One name in the investor records had been flagged separately. Stanley Okafor, 71 years old. Retired after 32 years of service. He had transferred $180,000 into Linux Holdings in a single move. The accountant highlighted it because the amount represented his entire liquid retirement account, not part of it, all of it. That kind of transfer usually points to one of two things: a trusted referral or a document strong enough to replace one. I did not have to guess which category this belonged to. I asked my attorney to trace exactly how Stanley Okafor had been brought in. The answer did not come from a phone record or a witness statement. It came from Marcus's own cloud backup. While the accounting work was underway, my attorney had retained a digital forensics specialist named Solstice to examine the Linux Holdings website and its underlying communications trail. What Solstice found was worse than the public-facing site. Attached to an email account linked to Marcus was a cloud archive containing 34 screen recordings. Each one showed Marcus on his own laptop building fraudulent legal engagement letters on Hartwell and Crane letterhead. He inserted my bar license numbers into the header fields. He edited the signatory block to read Peter Callahan, Esquire, General Counsel. He exported the finished documents, then opened the file properties and manually changed the metadata so the listed author and originating device matched my firm-registered laptop. He had done that 34 times over a 9-month period. Every recording was time-stamped. Solstice flagged one file above all the others. It was an engagement letter addressed to Stanley Okafor by name. It referenced the exact investment tier Stan had selected. It promised legal oversight. It cited my bar license. It carried the forged version of my signature Marcus had been refining over time. The timestamp showed the file had been created and sent 4 days before Stan's $180,000 transfer cleared. That was the moment the fraud stopped looking improvised. It was organized, repeated, built to survive scrutiny long enough to take real money from real people. Solstice put it plainly in his written summary. He didn't just steal your name. He built a paper trail specifically designed to make you look like the architect of all of it. By then, the folder on my desk was thick enough to feel different when I picked it up. Not heavier in the physical sense. Closer to complete. My attorney retained a document examination specialist named Gerald Miller to review the signatures on the Linux Holdings paperwork. Miller had 22 years of federal court experience and had testified as an expert witness in 41 prior cases. His assignment was narrow and simple. Compare the signatures on the Linux Holdings documents against verified samples of my actual signature and render an opinion. His report ran 31 pages. He examined 9 documents in total: the mortgage application, the Linux Holdings Incorporation papers, and 6 client engagement letters. His conclusion was the same on every one of them. Forgery. Not crude forgery, either. The signatures were close enough to survive casual review, which was part of what made them useful. Miller identified inconsistencies in pin pressure, baseline angle, and letter formation that meant nothing to an untrained eye and everything to his. Across all 9 documents, his confidence rating was 97.3%. Then he noted the part that mattered most to me. The signature pattern was consistent with someone who had worked from a specific reference document over time, something they had been able to study repeatedly, either physically or digitally. Based on the progression across the 9 samples, Miller estimated the forger had been practicing for at least 18 months. Given the timeline and access required, the most likely source document was a formal legal letter I had sent Marcus roughly 3 years earlier. The cease and desist. The letter I had sent to stop him had become the model for the forged version of my name. Miller's phrasing was clinical. The subject appears to have used the complainant's prior correspondence as a reference for signature replication over an extended period. I read that sentence twice and closed the report. The email chain came through discovery. My attorney subpoenaed Linda Callahan's records as part of the civil case moving alongside the federal investigation. Her sent folder contained 17 messages over an 8-month span. The subject lines alternated between Re Peter and Re LHQ3. The emails discussed Linux Holdings directly. They discussed investor timelines. They discussed quarterly targets. They discussed my name and my professional standing as what my mother herself called credibility cover. One message, sent to both Marcus and my father 3 weeks before the mortgage application was filed, said, "Peter won't agree if we ask him directly. So we don't ask. His name on the paperwork is enough. If it unravels, he can clean it up. He's a lawyer." Another, sent 2 months after the mortgage cleared, said, "Don't contact Peter yet. Let it run another quarter." That was the moment the earlier phone call with my mother changed shape in my mind. When she had told me to stay calm, to think about Marcus, to remember what family meant, She had not been improvising. She had already written the script weeks earlier. Later, those emails would be entered into the federal record as Government Exhibits 34 and 35. At that stage, they were already enough. My attorney arranged for me to meet Stanley Okafor before the case went to trial. Stan agreed immediately. We met at a coffee shop near his home on a Thursday afternoon. He was 71 years old, recently retired after 32 years of transit work, and steadier than I expected anyone in his position to be. He brought a folder of his own, the Linux Holdings engagement letter, the follow-up emails from the company account, and the wire confirmation from his bank. He set each page down between us carefully, like someone still trying to understand how a set of documents had managed to alter the rest of his life. He told me about his wife. Her health had been declining for 2 years. The $180,000 he moved into Linux Holdings was not investment capital in the abstract. It was the margin of safety they had built over decades, their cushion, their room to absorb whatever came next. He had moved it because the engagement letter looked legitimate. My name, my credentials, my bar license numbers, my forged signature. A licensed attorney at a real firm appeared to be standing behind the investment. He told his wife it was safe. Then he looked at me and asked the question that stayed with me longer than any line in any report. "I just need to know," he said. "Did you know we existed?" I told him no. I told him the truth in the plainest version I had. And sitting across from him, with his documents spread out on the table between us, I understood that this case was no longer only about my name, my credit, or my license. It was about the people my family had calculated would never meet me. A week after I met Stan, my attorney gave me 3 options. The first was civil only. Sue for damages. Fix the credit damage. Push for a private settlement. Keep the criminal exposure contained and prevent the case from spreading any further than it already had. It was the least destructive option. It was also the option that did the least for the people Linux Holdings had taken money from, and the most to preserve the possibility that Marcus or my parents would eventually repackage the same behavior under a different name. The second option was full federal cooperation. Turn over every document, every recording, every report, and let the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit take it wherever the evidence led. My attorney was very clear about what that meant. Once I opened that door, I would not get to control what came through it. Not for Marcus. Not for my parents. Not for anyone. The third option was to do nothing beyond protecting myself. Dispute the mortgage with the credit bureaus. Repair what I could. Absorb the professional disruption and walk away as quietly as possible. I sat with those 3 choices for 48 hours. I thought about Stan's folder on the coffee shop table, the wire confirmation, the engagement letter with my name on it, the way he had described that $180,000 not as an investment, but as the margin of safety he and his wife had built over decades. I thought about my mother's email. If it unravels, he can clean it up. He's a lawyer. Then I thought about the part that mattered even more. The FBI had already opened a preliminary inquiry into Linux Holdings 6 weeks before I ever saw the credit alert. Investor complaints were already in motion before I even knew the company existed. My cooperation was not going to create a case. It was going to complete one. I called my attorney. "Give them everything," I said. What I had not anticipated was how quickly my family would answer. 11 days after my attorney made formal contact with federal investigators, the State Bar received an anonymous complaint accusing me of being an active and knowing participant in the Linux Holdings fraud. The complaint cited specific facts that were not yet public. That detail mattered more than the anonymity did. The bar opened a disciplinary proceeding. It lasted 3 weeks. I submitted Miller's forensic report. I submitted Solstice's screen recordings and metadata findings. I submitted the email chain from my mother's sent folder showing the deliberate decision to use my name without my knowledge and keep me in the dark as long as possible. The ethics committee reviewed everything. The complaint was dismissed. No findings against me. My license remained intact in both states. But surviving the complaint was not free. During those 3 weeks, I lost 2 client clients who heard there was a bar inquiry and made their own decisions before the facts had finished catching up. I also lost momentum on a partnership track I had been building toward for 4 years. Hartwell and Crane's managing partner was direct about it. The track was not gone. It had been delayed. And it had been delayed because someone had filed a complaint that never should have existed. I never received official confirmation of who filed it. I did not need it. The timing, the specificity, and the 11-day gap between my FBI cooperation and the complaint made the answer obvious enough. My family had tried to take my license after failing to take my name. Neither attempt worked. That did not make the cost imaginary. It just made the choice final. The federal courthouse was 20 minutes from my apartment. I arrived early, signed in at security, and took my seat on the complaining witness side of the courtroom. I had my notebook with me, the same one I had opened the morning the credit alert came in. When all I had was a timestamp, a lender name, and a mortgage I knew I had not signed. I set the notebook on my knee, uncapped my pen, and waited. Marcus came in a few minutes later with his attorney. Gray suit. No tie. He sat at the defendant's table without looking toward the gallery. My parents were already seated behind him. My father was staring at the floor. My mother scanned the room until she found me, and when she did, her face settled into the same expression I had watched her use my entire life, the one that suggested whatever was happening to other people had somehow been done to her too. I held her gaze for a second, then looked back down at the notebook. Marcus had entered a guilty plea 4 months into the federal prosecution. Wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, mortgage fraud. By then, trial had stopped being a realistic option. Sentencing was all that remained. The judge entered. The room stood, then sat. Stan was the first person called forward. He walked to the podium slowly with one sheet of paper in his hand, though he barely looked at it once he started speaking. He talked for 8 minutes. He said he had read the Lennox Holdings engagement letter carefully when it arrived because a document carrying the name and bar license of a corporate attorney at an established firm was not something he considered casually. He said he showed it to his wife. He said the $180,000 he transferred was not surplus money or speculation. It was what he and his wife had built over 32 years as protection for whatever came next. Then he described the months after the transfer, the calls to the Lennox Holdings number, the voicemails, the silence after each one. He never raised his voice. He never dramatized anything. He just described the exact shape of what had been taken from him and what that money had meant before it was gone. When he sat back down, the courtroom was completely still. The prosecution moved into the evidentiary record. Miller's findings were read in first. 9 documents examined. 9 forgeries confirmed. Confidence rating, 97.3% across all samples. Then came the part that had not appeared in any public filing before that morning. The practice source. The court heard that the forged signature had been developed over time using a specific reference document, a cease and desist letter I had sent Marcus approximately 3 years earlier. That detail changed the air in the room. Solstice's findings came next. 34 screen recordings recovered from a cloud backup linked to Marcus's email account. 9 months of documented activity. Fabricated engagement letters built on Hartwell and Crane letterhead. Metadata manually altered to make the files appear to originate from my firm-registered device. Marcus stared at the defense table through all of it. He did not look at me once. Then the prosecution moved to the sentencing exhibits. Government Exhibit 34 was read aloud first. A message from Linda Callahan's sent folder to Marcus and Robert, dated 3 weeks before the mortgage application was filed. Peter won't agree if we ask him directly. So, we don't ask. His name on the paperwork is enough. If it unravels, he can clean it up. He's a lawyer. Government Exhibit 35 followed. Sent 2 months after the mortgage cleared. Don't contact Peter yet. Let it run another quarter. My parents were not at the defendant's table. Their own matters were proceeding separately. But they were there to hear their own language read back into a federal courtroom where nobody needed their version of events anymore. My mother lowered her eyes to her hands. My father did not move. When the judge sentenced Marcus, she did it without emphasis. 6 years in federal prison. 4 years on the wire fraud and mortgage fraud counts. 2 consecutive years for aggravated identity theft, mandatory under federal statute. Then she read her reasoning into the record. She described the offense as marked by deliberate and sustained exploitation of a family member's professional reputation for financial gain. She described the use of a forged bar license to solicit investments from retirees as a particularly egregious breach of public trust. She ordered full restitution to all identified investors, $1.4 million. She did not look at Marcus when she finished. She looked at her notes. I closed my notebook. I put the pen inside it, stood up, took my jacket from the back of the chair, and walked out of the courtroom. I did not stop for Marcus. I did not stop for my parents. By then, there was nothing left in that room that belonged to me except the record. The weeks after sentencing were administrative, which was exactly what I needed them to be. 18 days after the hearing, a court order voided the Crestview Capital mortgage in full. My attorney sent the order to all 3 credit bureaus. Within 30 days, the account was removed and my file was restored to its pre-fraud state. Hartwell and Crane's managing partner circulated a memo reinstating my partnership track. The bar complaint remained exactly where it belonged, dismissed, with no findings and no stain attached to my name. On paper, everything my family had tried to damage had been repaired. Then my attorney heard from theirs. Robert and Linda Callahan were in the middle of their own plea negotiations. Their lawyer wanted to know whether I would submit a statement of mitigation on their behalf, something the court could weigh, something that acknowledged family complexity, something that might soften what was coming. My attorney forwarded the request in a single paragraph. My answer went back the same way. No. No anger. No speech. No final argument disguised as generosity. Just no, in writing, through counsel, with the same precision that had carried the rest of the case. I still have the notebook. It sits on the corner of my desk at home, closed, with the pen still inside it. I have not opened it since the day I walked out of the courtroom. I do not need to. Everything in it already ended up where it belonged. In the federal record. The law called it identity theft. It was that. It was forgery. It was fraud. But more than anything, it was a family deciding that my name, my license, and my future were assets they could spend because I had always been the one expected to absorb the cost. That was their mistake. They built Linux Holdings on my name. I built the case that took it apart. That is what Scorched Earth looked like in the end. Not rage, not spectacle, not revenge for its own sake. Just a clean record, a closed notebook, and no one left with any claim on me.